calloused hands, ink and faith through this broken land. The Bible and the Constitution stand. Promises carved in sacred stone. A republic built but not alone. Two books guide us when we roam. The word and the law, sacred and free. One for the soul, one for the dream. They hold us up, they let us be. The Bible and the Constitution, you and me. A preacher's a hymn, a patriot's fight. One sees heaven, one sets duties tight. Both keep burning through the darkest night. Freedom's ink and holy grace, two old maps for the human race. Both hold power, both embrace. The word and the law, sacred and free. One for the soul, one for the dream. They hold us up, they let us be. The Bible and the Constitution, you and me.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to The Egg, and The Egg presents The Egg. Let's crack open some history with Educate, Grow, Glorify every Wednesday evening at 8:30 Eastern Time. And you'll find that we have different programs going on every Wednesday. The views and opinions expressed are those of the individual contributors and do not necessarily reflect the official position of Tactical Civics. And thank you, everybody. Let's crack open some history here. And week one, we have Michael Gordon, who is stepping into the Constitution, and he'll be with us this evening sharing more about our Constitution. This is learning the Constitution in a way you have never learned or understood before, so I highly recommend always coming to our first Wednesdays. Second Wednesday of the month, we have Martin Holtz, who is of historical importance, teaching us the history you never knew, the history you thought you knew, but you don't know. And the third Wednesday of the month is America's Foundation, the Forefathers Monument, with Carolyn Voss and myself, Erin Lee. And we go over the teachings and the videos of Stephen. Forgive me, I just lost the name, but we do share videos and we go through the study guide, and you won't want to miss this because there's really incredible information about our monument in this program. The fourth Wednesday of every month, we have Patrick Locke with Pathway to the Forefathers Monument. He shares with you details of the monument, things that you did not know, and explains even further things about that monument that you probably never even saw or understood. Every Friday night, we have Liberty Lab with Brad Boardman. Please don't miss that at 8 Eastern Time. And Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday, we have Zoom Thank Praise in the mornings. Please join us for those if you can. We also have Fellowship and Prayer, Sundays, Mondays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays. And please check out this information and where to find all of that at the Tactical Civics Training Center in the Member Events calendar. And don't forget about Project America 125, our action mission. If you haven't already gotten your state activated, please go to projectamerica125.com/activate.
Father, we just thank you for every single heart and soul here tonight. And Lord, I bless Michael and his words, Lord. This is your mission, and we just want to glorify you. And we just roll out the red carpet for the Holy Spirit to be here. And we just thank you, Father, for everybody here and for all the work that's gone into this class tonight. And bless Michael. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 Welcome, everybody. Let's get started. So first, with the disclaimer, we have to have our traditional disclaimer. I'm not a lawyer, doctor, dentist, psychologist, or priest. I'm Mr. Nobody, not giving advice, just providing information and some of my opinions related to our U.S. Constitution. I'm not advocating violence of any kind, only peaceful, lawful assembly, thought, and speech and action. So please think for yourself and act responsibly. To try to stay mute unless you're talking. Use the chat rooms. And I, again, will ask you to use the chat to respond to most of my questions. That way we can get a lot of responses quickly, and we'll be monitoring those and responding to those. And then sometimes if we have a person actually speak, you just don't forget to lower your hand and mute when you're done. And then, try to be concise and stay on topic when you're speaking. Let's see, I'm getting interrupted with messages. And then if you're comfortable doing that, put your county and your state after your last name so people can kind of see where people are. It's kind of nice. You don't have to, but it's just nice if you're comfortable doing that. And then, of course, don't worry, be happy, be nice, especially to me. I always like to start off with the mission. Our mission is very important. It's the foundation of everything we do. And our mission is to glorify Jesus Christ, maintain our civilization by living like responsible adults, enforcing what we stipulate in our Constitution. It's a very powerful mission. We take it very seriously. So for those folks who aren't members, welcome. This is who we are. All right, so really quick, we're just going to review the last two sessions, which that we did. This is the third session. We talked about the hierarchy of authority, where we have God, we the people underneath God, and then everything else, all of our documents, all of our institutions, federal government, states, they're all underneath we the people. They work for us. So that's the important part of that. And then we talked about the political spectrum, and we define it not in terms of left and right, but in terms of political power, anywhere from 0% to 100%, 0 being no government, total government being 100%. And our Constitution, which is limited government that is protecting the rights of the people, that's pretty much in the middle. And then we have the 5 forms of government: monarchy ruled by one, oligarchy ruled by a few, democracy ruled by the majority, a republic, which we have redefined to be representative government, and then anarchy is no government. And then we basically have two choices. We can keep our competitive free enterprise system in a republic, or we can have a monopolistic state-controlled system under an oligarchy. We must choose. And of course, our definitions that we had, and I changed the definition of republic a little bit to accommodate the wording experts. And basically, it's government by where we the people are the collective. As a collective, we are the sovereign, and we exercise that through our elected representatives. So that's the gist of it. It's representative government is the gist of what we mean by that. And of course, we define capital as means of production, distribution, and exchange. And then I'm going to quiz you now. So I'm going to ask you guys to put it in the chat. What is the Constitution? See if you remember. So go ahead, put some chat in there. Our supreme law requirements document. Oh yes, Martin remembers. Yes, all these are correct. It is the law. It's the highest law in the land. It is that. But for our purposes, and this is review, remember we said it's a document. It is a document. In fact, it is a requirements document, which is very important. We're going to say why that matters. It's also known as a system specification. And it is specifying what we the people stipulate for the system of government of the United States of America. So it is very important. It means that everything in there is what we are stipulating for our public servants. And just in review, a system specification includes multiple things. We have to include, to be complete, the purposes, the functions, the structure, the processes in some cases, and always the core principles which drive or underlie everything else. And of course, there's rules associated with everything. So that's a system spec should have all of these features in it. And then we're going to review the core principles, which most of these come from the Declaration, or they don't come from it, but they're in that document. There's one God. God is good. He created our universe, including our earth, according to his natural law, creationism. All men are created equal by God as equals. All men are endowed by God with certain unalienable rights, such as life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. There's also the right of self-governance is in there in the first paragraph, and later on the right, in fact, it's a duty of we the people to alter our government as needed. And I added this one. This one wasn't specifically in there, but I think it is so important for everything that we do. This fifth principle, the nature of fallen man includes both good and evil tendencies. Without this, we wouldn't need governments, right? But because of that, we do. But we don't want to give government too much power for the same reason. And the purpose of government is to secure God-given rights. It is limited. And all government authority is derived from the consent of the governed. So this is the core principles that underlies everything our country is about, and our system of governance. It needs to is built on this. Okay, so remember we talked about purpose, and that's right in the preamble. We and the people, in order to form a more perfect union. Now I put this BR1, business requirement or business objective. I'm giving these an identifier because I'm going to refer to them elsewhere. So I wanted to just add that now. And but these are there are 6 objectives, right? And remember, all of these objectives, these are not just what our founders had in mind. This is a requirements document. So these objectives are part of the requirements. So in other words, what it means is that our servants have to pursue these purposes and none other. That we're stipulating that. It's not just, oh, isn't that nice? That's why they did this. No, it's much more than that, right? And we ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States to achieve these objectives, which makes them required for everybody. And then ordain is it further demonstrates that the virtue of a superior authority. That's us. We the people are superior to our public servants and the Constitution. We created it. We can change it. We own it. Okay, then we talked about functions, and I'm just going to list these here. We're going to have a whole class on that, so I just wanted to list the gist of that. And if you notice, we the people, we establish the Constitution, just like it says. We also enforce it. We elect representatives and the president and the vice president. We pay taxes now. It didn't used to be that way. We judge the facts, which is what we usually what a petit jury is. That's what they do. And we present and indict. That's the grand jury. These are all organizations of we the people. We criticize and petition for redress, and we peacefully assemble. We do a lot of other things, but this is very relevant stuff for the Constitution. The several states appoint senators. At least they did. They fill vacancies. They pay taxes, or they used to. And again, we're going to distinguish between the original Constitution and how it's been changed, but I'm mainly focusing on how it was originally. They can request a convention. They can ratify amendments. They can request federal assistance if they have a domestic problem, and they can apply for a convention. Congress makes the laws, lays and collects taxes, appropriates and borrows money, admits new states, constitutes inferior tribunals, declares war, propose amendments, call conventions, override vetoes. The House can impeach and originate revenue bills. The Senate can try impeachments and ratify treaties. The president executes the laws, or makes sure that they are executed, receives ambassadors, convenes the Congress. He gives the State of the Union. It doesn't have to be a speech, but it has to provide the information. Makes treaties, nominates officials and Supreme Court judges, fills vacancies, requires opinions of his staff and department heads, grants reprieves and pardons, and vetoes bills. And then the Supreme Court administers justice, but they have jurisdiction which is limited. Foreign entities, high seas, interstate, and federal officials. Not a whole lot. And then we briefly mentioned the structure. We're going to spend a lot of time on this, so I'm just going to whiz through this. You should all recognize this. That's the president there, the vice president, ambassadors, other officials, the Supreme Court, the federal courts, and then we have we the people and the states with the legislative, executive, judicial branches of each state. They're all in this structure to a degree because they're related to the federal government. And then we elect the representatives. It used to be the states appointed the senators, but that's changed, but that was originally how it was. And then we got all these other relationships which we're going to dive into that more. So I don't want to spend too much time on this. And then now we have the people are actually electing the senators. And then there's a couple of processes that are addressed in the Constitution, which means they're very important because they wanted to have requirements related to a process. That means these are important processes. So the legislative process for passing bills, orders, and resolutions is laid out in the Constitution. The election process for the presidential and vice presidential, the whole electoral college, and a little bit about the amendment process, not a whole lot there. We defined power last time, and this isn't the final definition, but it is the definition we're going to use for now because this is the way it's used in the Constitution. It's the authority to do something, which is a functional. It really means a system function, and these are things our servants must do. So when they have the power, it's the power to do this and do that. But in a later class, we're going to talk about power in a much more extensive way. It's much more than just that. So, but for now, we're going to use a simple definition. And then we had the map of the dynamics with the the political spectrum over here that you're familiar with, from 0 to 100. We added the economic power in this relationship here. They kind of go together. And then there's also 0 to 100, and the people power is down below in this lower triangle somewhere. And then it's not just a single point. When we map our location, we're not just putting a single dot. It's actually 4 corners that makes a rectangle. So in this case, you have total government political power and total economic power held by the oligarchy, of course. And in that case, the people power is way down here. It's 0 with the base of this triangle. So, and then, this correlates. If they have all the power, we have no power, right? So it's always a rectangle. And as things get better, that rectangle gets smaller and smaller until the ideal is right smack in the middle. That's the sweet spot that we're always aiming for, where everything's in balance. And if you notice, this is over here, we have too much state power, not enough, too much corporate power, economic power, and not enough. And then down here, you have liberty. And the highest amount of liberty is right here at the smiley face in the middle, right? And that's where everything's in balance. And if you don't have that, if the corporations take over, we have fascism. If the state takes over, we have communism. And they're really not any different because they go together and they give us tyranny. Usually the more powerful the state, they take over corporations, economic systems, and vice versa. So they really, it's bad news. So what we want is maximum liberty and 0 tyranny. At that middle point, there's no tyranny. And there's no communism and no fascism. It's pure liberty. That's the ideal. And that's what the Constitution is for, right? That's what those 6 objectives right there in the middle. And where we are, I'd estimate somewhere around here. You can argue one way or the other, but I just wanted to put something out here. So this is all what we covered before. So now we got to get into the new stuff. Okay, real quick, a timeline. You guys this will be familiar. Starting with the French and Indian War, we have all these different events. The Albany Congress occurred during that war, and that was not a rebellion. It was relating to the French Indian War. It had to do with Indians. The first thing was the Currency Act of 1964. Then the Sugar Act. The Stamp Act was the first direct taxes on the colonies. And then that gave rise to what was called the Loyal Nine, which eventually became the Sons of Liberty. And then there was a Stamp Act Congress. It just got all these different acts. Got to the Boston Massacre. Committees of correspondence became very active. The Tea Party, the First Continental Congress. Things were getting really bad. And then we have this Article of Association, which I hadn't heard of before. I don't think most people have. We were still colonies, but it was the first real organization where we tried to work as a whole. And that's where we tried to basically come together and create a union of colonies, mainly for economic boycotting purposes. And the British got pissed, and they just came down really hard. And then we had a fight in Lexington and Concord, and that was the end of that. So then we had the Second Continental Congress, which they created the United Colonies of North America at first. It was not the United States. They were still colonies. And then the British proclaimed a rebellion, and so we declared our independence. And then we created the Articles of Confederation, which we're going to talk about because that is the original structure, and the current structure contains that, or at least remnants of that. So it's important to understand what that is and how we got to where we are starting from that point. It was ratified. We had Shays' Rebellion and a bunch of other crazy things. Then so we had to rethink things. We needed a stronger central government. It was not working. So we had a constitutional convention, which was ratified finally in May of 1790. But we got the 9 states before then, but the last state finally then. So that's the timeline to put everything in context. So, question for you: the 5 C's of requirements. This is a well-known, or this is a thing in requirements engineering. All well-specified requirements are clear, concise, consistent, complete, and correct. So, using the chat, which of these is the most likely thing that they're not going to be able to get it right? If they fail, which one of these is the most common reasons why the requirements are not specified very well? See what you. Oh, can I use a pointer? Can you? I have a mouse. Can you not see the mouse?
Yes.
Okay, so hopefully everyone can see that. And put your answer in the cloud. One of these 5 starts with a C. Which one do you think is the one that is most often not happening? Concise. Okay. So yeah, clear means it's not ambiguous. We know exactly what they're talking about. Concise means they get to the point quickly. Consistent means that they don't contradict each other. Complete means they're not missing anything, and correct means it's going to achieve the objectives, or the objectives themselves are being correct. Clear, correct, consistent, concise. That's interesting. Repeat the question. Yeah, it's which do you think of these 5 is the most commonly not gotten right? I'm seeing all these correct, consistent. Well, you might be surprised with the answer, and the answer is complete. I mean, if you think about it, all these other issues, obviously there are times when it's not clear. It's not at all clear what it is. So that happens a lot. And sometimes the conciseness is usually, at least with the founders, they were pretty good at getting to the point. Consistent mostly, but there may be some cases where that doesn't happen. And correct, I think a lot of these are correct, but that more likely is it's not complete, which means that they haven't really thought it through. There's too much detail for them to comprehend up front, and they kind of have to, build something and say, oops, we needed this and we needed that. So the biggest problem, the biggest risk, and the most common thing is that they're not complete. So, and we're going to as we look through these documents, we're going to, come back to this. So I just want to introduce that concept. All right. A U.S. Constitution is a specification. The purpose, which is part of that specification, is like the perspective plan when you're building a house. It gives you perspective, okay? It's not actually used by the builders necessarily, but it's mainly for the client. It says what we're doing, why we're doing it, what's it going to look like in real life, 3D. So the purpose is similar to that. Well, the structure specification is like a floor plan, and when you see it, it's just going to, like you're looking straight down. That's exactly what it looks like. The function specification is like an elevation. It shows you more information than the floor plan, but you can't see it all at once. So each function is addressed. So it's harder you got to tie them all together somehow. But that's like an elevation plan. And all these plans are important. So that's the purpose, structure, and function, very important. And finally, a process is very detailed. It shows how the functions execute within the structure for the purpose. So it's usually like a wiring diagram, it looks like. And those are the detailed plans. You always need that when you're building a house or something, a building. So these 4 components of a specification are all important. And what's also interesting to note is that all of these plans show the whole system from a distinct point of view. These aren't just partial systems. The purpose is part of it, the structure is another part. No, the purpose is the whole thing from a certain point of view. The structure is the whole thing from a certain point of view. And same with the other ones. So that's important to keep in mind. All right, so we're going to dive into system structure. Somebody in the waiting room there. Okay, so this is the Articles of Confederation. And we're going to start looking at the structure that it is defining, the first version. And this was our first constitution. So, and our current constitution actually contained this, at least up until 1913. So look at this. This is interesting. This is the very beginning of the Articles. Somebody want to read that? Carolyn, you want to pick somebody to read that?
Yes. Diane, would you read that, please, from Nebraska?
Yeah, got to
Okay.
unmute.
To all to whom these presents shall come, we, the undersigned delegates of the states affixed to our name, send greetings. Greeting.
Yeah, so is there anything in this that really sticks out to you? Diane, I guess since you're talking, yeah, we can just chat for the group for a second. Yeah, anything that in here that really like, it's like, wow, I didn't know that. What about this?
I don't know, the
Oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
Yes, yes, the
The
delegates of the
delegates?
states. Yeah, it's not we the people, is it?
Uh-uh.
It's delegates of the states. Very different. So it didn't start with we the people. It starts with we the undersigned delegate of the states. So that's a very significant difference in the mindset of the founders at this early stage in the process.
And
So
we still have that process, right? Like I'm a delegate for my county. And
yes, delegate. Yes, the
you
delegate is
have to
relevant.
be
Yes.
voted on and everything. So
Right. So, but the important thing is the delegates are individuals, of course, but they represent the states. They're not we the people anymore. Like, I mean, this is before the new constitution. So we initially were just thinking in terms of states. Okay. And the states were, that was what it was about. And so this is basically their, on the date that they're declaring that they're going to create these articles of confederation. And this is how they do it. This is how they describe it. So go ahead and read that, what's in quotes. Diane, yeah, while you keep.
Articles of the Confederation and I might get my glasses. Perpetual union between the states of New Hampshire, Massachusetts Bay, Rhode Island, and the Providence Plantations, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight two things: that it's perpetual union, which is going to. Oops. Oh, I shouldn't have clicked on that. Let me go back. My mistake. Okay. Let me continue from here. Okay. It's a perpetual union, which that's maybe a little bit ambiguous because does that mean we can't get out? We're going to fight over that later. But the main thing right now is between the states. So this specification is by the states. It is the states are coming together. This isn't a we the people thing, not yet. So that's really interesting. So, and then we get into, there's 13 articles and we're not going to look at all of them, but we're just going to just get the feel for some of the amazing things that are in there. So there's the name of it, right? And that's a rule in our specification document, but they just call it an article. And then there's Article 2. Now this one is very interesting. Someone want to read this?
Kathleen, would you read this for us, please?
Okay,
Thank you.
let me move my Zoom people.
Yeah, just Article 2.
Just Article 2.
Yeah.
Where to go? I see 1.
Oh, you don't see 2?
Nope.
No. I see Rule 1.
That's weird. Huh.
There it is. It's coming up. Article
Okay.
2. Each state retains its sovereignty, freedom, and independence, and every power, jurisdiction, and right, which is not by this confederation expressly delegated to the United States in Congress assembled.
Yeah. Now, what does that remind you of in our Constitution?
Is it Article 10?
Yes. Well, it's the 10th Amendment. Yes.
10th Amendment.
Very similar, but there's some slight differences. It's real. It doesn't mention anything about the people, right? And it just talks about the states, and it doesn't say just powers. It also says jurisdictions and rights. So that means the states have powers, and this is the way they're looking at it. They have jurisdiction and they have rights. So they don't talk about what they are, but they're saying is we're going to keep those. We're sovereign, right? Unless it is not just delegated, but expressly delegated. So that's an interesting term there. They didn't use that in the second Constitution. So it's important to note this was the way they were thinking at that time. Very little power going to the central government. And of course, that's just another rule in our specification world. And then if we go on to Article 3, now this one's interesting. Someone want to read this?
Ken Chapman, would you read that, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Article 3, the said states hereby severally enter into a firm league of friendship with each other for their common defense, the security of their liberties, and their mutual and general welfare, binding themselves to assist each other against all force offered to or attacks made upon them or any of them on account of religion, sovereignty, trade, or any other pretense whatsoever.
Right. So let's reformulate this in our specification. So I'm going to use the same words. I'm just going to structure them a little bit. The said states hereby severally enter into a firm league of friendship with each other for their common defense the mutual and general welfare, and the security of liberties. I'm doing it this way because what they're really talking about is what in the Constitution preamble we're calling objectives 4, 5, and 6. Interestingly, they do not include objectives 1, 2, and 3. They're not in here. So you can imagine why, at that time, they didn't want to form a more perfect union. They just wanted a very limited confederation of a league of friendship. They were very careful not to create a central government. They're in the middle of a war against such a thing, right? And they weren't too concerned with establishing justice because that was the state's job. The central government doesn't need to do that, right? And of course, they didn't really realize that the weakness would create all sorts of domestic instability. So they didn't think of this one, ensuring domestic. So these things came as a result of living under the Articles for a few years, but they weren't there yet. So that's interesting to note. And so let's restructure the whole thing now. So this is the system requirement is creating a league of friendship. These are the 3 objectives that tie back to this system requirement. This is what it's for. And then this is a rule relating to that confederacy or league of friendship. They're supposed to assist each other, which they're in the middle of a war, so they better well do that, otherwise they're doomed. So this is clearly, you can understand why they would do this. And I just want to introduce a concept here called traceability. Traceability relates the system requirements, which we have over here, creating this new league, and ruled with 1 or more business objectives, showing the cause-effect relationship between the business and the system requirements. We're the business owners, right? So those objectives are stipulated by us. That's why we want the system to do and structure it the way we are stipulating. So traceability is a relationship between these two, and it's important to understand that, because when you're evaluating the system requirements, you got to say, is this going to do what we want it to do, right? So that's an important concept. And there's one thing that's missing from this, and I wouldn't imagine any of you guys would think of it off the top of your head. So I'm just going to show you what it is, and that is called the success criteria. Like, if we're going to have these business requirements, how are we going to measure the success of this system, whether or not we're achieving those objectives? And the measures are quantitative, and the metrics are qualitative. I'm sorry, I said that backwards. Measures are qualitative, things like efficiency, speed. If you're looking at a car and you have goals for the car, for example, and the metrics would be miles per hour. If you're going to measure efficiency, you might use miles per hour to do it. So that's the difference in measures and metrics. But we'll talk about those later. But I just want to introduce that concept. This is going to allow us to enforce the Constitution in a whole new way when we understand the power of a specification document and what you can gain control of. So here it is, Article 3, laid out in its completed form with the rules. Now, these other rules might look familiar. This is Article 1 and Article 2. Those are just descriptions or rules relating to this confederacy, which is the requirement. So we're giving it a name, and we're saying that the sovereignty and all that. So they all go together. And when you understand the system, you don't want to just understand it line by line. You got to see how everything fits together. So we're going to do a little bit of that. We're not going to do the whole thing, just because that's kind of tedious. I mean, if you look at Article 4, there's a whole bunch of text here. So we're just going to quickly just show you how it can. So if you notice there, it says, the first thing it says is to better secure and perpetuate mutual friendship and intercourse among the peoples of the different states in this union. What does that sound like? Does that sound familiar? Yeah, well, that is in a very differently worded say, that is the first business objective in the Constitution, to form a more perfect union, right? But they didn't say it like that yet because they really were hesitant to form a union. So they call it mutual friendship and intercourse, but and they do call it a union, but they're very cautious in their wording. So that's interesting. You can kind of see how they've evolved over time. And then there's a rule about free inhabitants. And you don't have to. I don't need you to read all this. It's too much information for now. But this is exactly the same article, just structured into a business objective that's in there and a bunch of rules. It's much easier to work with this when you break it out like this, because then you can identify them individually and show their relationships and put them together into a complete structure. So this really needs to be done with the whole document. And so Article 5 is also, all this stuff. And here's another, look what it says at the beginning. for the more convenient management of the general interests of the United States. Okay, again, that's a purpose. That's an objective. It sounds like general welfare to me, right? So it's basically the same thing, but they worded it differently. And then they've got all these other pieces to it, which I'm going to structure them just for you. So there's our general welfare objective, which is also in the Constitution. Before we're done, I'm going to show you how the Constitution modifies this. Some of the things were carried directly over without changing them. Some of the things were removed from the Confederation articles in the Constitution, and some of the things were added. And it'll be very interesting to look at exactly what they did and why. We're not going to get into that today, but because today's about the structure. And so then you've got these rules, delegates and appointing delegates, and you have to have at least 2 or no more than 7 members, right? No more 3 years within every 6-year term limits, requirements for salaries, things like that. States have to maintain their own delegates. Each state has 1 vote. Now that's an interesting thing right there. Each state has 1 vote. This isn't a we the people type of organization, is it? So that's really that gives us a clue about the structure. And then, they can say whatever they want when they're in session. And a lot of these rules are going to be almost word for word in the Constitution, but we'll get there eventually. So here's Article 6, a bunch of words, right? And we're just going to we've got break them into all these different rules. And we can deal with it a little bit more easily when we break it up like this. But I'm not here to go through it all right now. I just wanted to get a feel for some of the, what this requirements document is and how we could specify it in a more structured way so it's easier to understand the different components and how they relate together, because it's hard when you're just reading it as text. Article 8, and here's common defense and general welfare. Again, they're referring to their objective. And then we've got, the requirements, and then a rule relating to that requirement, and another rule. This is interesting because it's talking about they're going to create a treasury, a common treasury, and then they're going to assess the value of taxes proportional based on the value of the land. But the taxes for paying that proportion in Rule 2 shall be laid and levied by the authority and direction of the legislatures of the several states. So this confederation does not have the power to tax. The states do that. The only thing that the confederation does, it proportionally assigns, it says, here's what we need, and it apportions it to the different states and lets them collect that money. Well, that was a problem. Obviously, a lot of the states didn't do various reasons. So this was a major problem with it. But this is where they declared this, they specified this right here. So we're almost done. Here's another one, Article 9. This is a huge one. This has all the powers that they have. You might recognize some of these. The power to declare peace and war, with exceptions as a rule. Sending and receiving ambassadors, entering into treaties, and there's a rule for that. This is interesting. No treaty of commerce shall be made where the legislative power of the states shall be restrained. So the states could impose their own imposts and duties because they were sovereign states. They didn't delegate that power. But the Confederation could also do that. So that's interesting. And then it has to do with captures on land and naval forces. All these things are in the Constitution. You should recognize them. But they're just a little different, and they're not all there, but a lot of them are. So and again, this is more of Article 9. It's a big article, right? So I'm just going to quickly, because it's a lot easier to look at it when it's structured. And you might not be able to read that because I had to fit it on the screen. So don't worry if you can't read it. You just get the feel for it. So this has to do with disputes. Now notice the Congress was the one, there was no Supreme Court. So Congress basically had the function that is now given to the Supreme Court of dealing with disputes between states and foreign countries and things like that. So this is all about the rules for that, and how they're going to resolve the disputes without getting into the details. So we're just doing an overview. And then some more Article 9 stuff, controversies, more powers. So then again, more controversies, which would again be a court thing today. The power of regulating the alloy and the value of coin. You probably recognize that in the Article 1, Section 8, basically. Or by that, so the states, the states can't, because the Congress has sole and exclusive right of doing that. They fix the standards of weights and measures, regulating trade, but not members of any of the states. provided that the legislative right of any state with its own limits not be infringed or violated. Well, we know that doesn't apply anymore, does it? So this is the Commerce Clause, that the first version of it, right? But they were very clear that internal state commerce was not to be messed with. So unfortunately, they weren't so clear in the Constitution. But anyway, so here it is in Article 9. Post offices, land forces, appointing of officers, etc., making rules for all that stuff. These are all in the Constitution. And then here's more. Article 9 is a big one. And this is where they can have a committee of the states, which is a small group to run things while they're not in session. So I won't bore you with that. And so here, they talk about other things, but these are just rules, or these are just, they can borrow money. They can emit bills of credit. Okay. They took that out in the Constitution because they had a problem with that. They were printing too much money. So they said, we better not allow that. So that was removed, but it's in here in the first government, right? Build and equip a navy. And that's, I couldn't fit it. So that has to do with land forces and requisitions from each state. So once again, they had to beg the states to get soldiers and supplies from the states because they couldn't raise the money themselves. And then here's a rule for how that works, but you probably can't read it, but we'll come back to all of this later in another class. Almost done. So the Committee of the States, some rules. They were going to let Canada join the Confederation. How many of you knew that? It didn't happen, but they were offering it. Now we're talking about it today. It's funny. Nobody else, unless we get 9 states to say so. And then here's just a rule about you got to have you got to pay your bills, basically. And then the last article, a bunch of stuff. So the last thing I want to show you is how they signed it. They didn't just sign it as individuals. They signed it each below. Before they signed it, they said on the part and behalf of the state of, and then the name of the state, and then they signed it. So basically they were signing for the state. This wasn't a we the people thing. This was clearly a we the states thing. Every one of them was just all the states. So the states were signing up to this, not the people themselves. Which, when we look at the actual structure, you're going to see why that's important, which we're about to do, and then we're going to talk about it. So good, we're almost at 9:30. I apologize for whizzing through a lot of information, but I wanted to get to the final picture. But see how it's always about the states here. Okay, so here is the structure of the Articles of Confederation. Right, we have the Congress, and those little orange circles are the delegates to the states, anywhere from 2 to 7 people. But each state only gets 1 vote, so it doesn't matter how many delegates you have. It's not 1 vote per delegate. It's 1 vote per state. So there's 13 votes possible here. And then you have all 13 states. And then who gives us the leadership of the states? Well, that's we the people of the several states. So if you look at this very simple structure, this is actually, when we use our definition of republic, every one of these states is a republic, right? Because a republic is ruled by representatives chosen by the majority of the people. That's the definition of republic. So every one of these states is a republic, and this is a confederation of republics. So our first structure was a confederation of republics. Okay, we don't really call it that, but that's what it was. We just called it a confederation, but it's a confederation of republics, of sovereign republics. Had very little power. Okay, so now we're going to go to the last diagram, which we're going to construct, and then we're going to talk about it because that's where we want to really open things up and have a discussion around it. But all of that content of the articles whittles down structurally to this one picture. Okay, and so if we look at the Constitution and we look at the structure of the Constitution, we have the Senate and all the states, right? Which, wow, look at that. It's the exact same structure. This is the Constitution, and it looks like the Articles of Confederation structure, except instead of calling it Congress, it's just the Senate. But you have not 2 to 7, but 2 from every state, right? And you get 2 votes, which is really no different than 1 because each state gets the same number of votes, which is, makes it equivalent. I don't think state senators would really vote opposite each other. That wouldn't make sense. They'd probably get recalled pretty quick if they did that. And then you have we the people of the several states electing their representatives and so forth and their officials for their state. So what you have here is a confederation of republics, okay, with buried into the structure of the U.S. Constitution. But so now let's build on that, and as you can see what else is. So then we also have so Congress is bigger than the Senate, and you've got this new thing, the House of Representatives, which didn't exist before, and that also has a bunch of people in it, delegates, if you will, representatives, and they are representatives of we the people directly. There's no state involvement, right? And this we the people is not we the people of the states, these are we the people of these districts, congressional districts, right? So they're much smaller districts than the we the people that relating to the Senate, because the state represents all the people in that state, and they choose their senators. Whereas here, each district chooses their representative, and of course, Tactical Civics wants to make these districts much smaller than they are today. So we would have thousands of these we the peoples that are all tied into the House of Representatives. So real quick, I'm just going to say a few things about it, and then I'm going to finish, and then we're going to talk about it. And I've just to open it up for questions and discussion. And we're at 9:30, so we're pretty much right on time. Okay, so what I wanted to say is that if you look at the House of Representatives by itself, that is actually a gigantic republic, right? Because a republic is government by representatives elected by we the people. That's exactly what this is, right? So you have a gigantic republic, which is part of the Congress, which is basically, when you think about this kind of republic, it's a national-based system. It's where you have one government and the people are electing that one government and they're ruling those people. That's a national system. But over here on the Senate, you don't have, you got the states in the middle, and the states are represented in the Senate. So that's not a gigantic nationalistic Senate. That's a confederate structure, right? Just like the Articles. And so you have a confederation of republics on the one hand, and you have a national republic on the other hand, all combined into a single system. And so we call that our federal government, right? Because it's a combination of national and confederate structure. And James Madison talked about this a lot in the Federalist Papers, which we'll get into another time. So, but this one picture shows that very nicely. And then to finish up, we've got the executive branch with the president, vice president, and all the other officials. And then you've got all these relationships. Now that EC over there is the Electoral College. And interestingly, you have we the people, look at Georgia over here. We the people elect the officials of Georgia. They appoint the electors for the president and the vice president. So you've got 4 levels of representation before you. So it's not direct. We don't directly elect the president and vice president. And in the old way, it used to go through the states. Now, well, it still does, but they kind of just do what we say, whatever the people want. But they did structure it that way for a reason, and so that's interesting to see it visually. And then we also have, now over here, this is really interesting. These little M's represents all of the state militias. And I was trying to figure out how I could fit those in without ruining my diagram. So I just put them over here. But there's one of these for every state, right? And then this one here where it's combined is the militia, the Army, and the Navy, which at that time that's all we had. We didn't have an Air Force. That's the military, right? And when the militia is called into service, they become part of that structure, which is ruled by the president, who's the chief commander-in-chief of that, all 3 of them. But if they're not called by the Congress, then the militia doesn't go in here. So the militia acts as a bulwark against a president that wanted to use the military. They don't have control of the militia unless they're called into service. So there's a check and balance there that's very interesting, which we'll get into later. But right now, we're just looking at the structure. This is the floor plan. Think of it as a floor plan of our house. And these are some relationships. So you've got the states controlling the militias, and the Congress can call them into service for the Union, and then they become under the domain of the president, right? And of course, then the Congress funds these guys. They define the training requirements and the standards. They do all that, but the states actually train the militias and appoint many of the officers. So that I tried to show those relationships here. And then you have the judicial branch with the Supreme Court and the lower courts, and all those relationships, which we'll talk about those later. But so this diagram's getting a little bit harder to, I want to keep it as simple as possible, but it's amazing. We're talking about the whole thing, and it's all right here in one picture. And finally, we have foreign nations that are also referenced in the Constitution. And there's relationships between the Supreme Court. They deal with any disputes involving foreign nations. The Senate has a relationship with foreign nations because they ratify treaties, and the president makes agreements and treaties with the foreign nations, which have to be ratified. So all three branches interact with foreign nations, and that's what this shows. So that is basically the structure as it was originally. Now I'm going to do something depressing. I'm going to take us to 1913, and guess what happens? Oops, bye-bye. Doesn't that look ugly? We just got rid of the states, and so now the people are electing the senators directly. So now the Senate is like a giant republic. It's a national system, just like the House of Representatives is a national system. It's the people are governed by this single entity. There's no two layers of government anymore. We took one out. Now we still have the states, but in the constitutional structure, we removed them. And so this weakened the states tremendously because they don't really have representation in the US government, not the way they used to. And so you see that it's like we're more of a nation in terms of the way we're structured. And so I think that's something we want to really look at, maybe going back to this, where we're not so much a nation as we are a federation, which it means that we have multiple levels of government with their own jurisdiction. It's all about separation of powers and checks and balances. So this is it. This is the full structure, basically that is it from the evolution from the articles, and it's to what we now have theoretically. But of course, in today's environment, the executive branch would be huge with all sorts of stuff, and the Congress would be kind of much smaller. And the intelligence community, national security state, all of that would be much more prominent. But this is the structure that we must enforce. Anybody got any good questions? Keep in mind your questions they're good because we all need to learn this, and there are going to be lots of other people that probably have the same question. So please,
Martin.
You've got we the people directing or electing each group there or each representative, but that's really not the way it works, is it? We have to have a party in between us and our elected officials for both houses of Congress now, mainly because in the House of Representatives we got such huge districts that we the people can't really operate unless we're joining a party that has, organization on the ground and money and all that kind of stuff and political ins and outs. And in the Senate it's even worse because the territory and the district of a state is so huge that no individual is typically known, and no individual has the fiduciary wherewithal. So it's up to the parties, and the way it's evolved now, the parties even do the nominations, and the states really don't have anything to say about it. So
yeah,
in both cases, we have abdicated our we the people powers to the parties, and they are in control, not we.
That is a very good point, Martin. And there is nothing in the Constitution that mentions political parties. Now, it is mentioned in the Federalist Papers that they, addressing that, the factionalism and so on. But when you think about it, when you remove these states and you've got we the people electing people, well, in theory, we have all the power, right? Well, but because of these parties they're not stipulated by we the people. They're not in the Constitution. They're not in the state constitutions. This is something that was created, and what it does, it centralizes control of the nominees, which is a major part of getting representation. And that's not those parties that as we know, as we try to get involved, they're not we the people entities, are they? They're we the lobbyists and we the bankers kind of. So it's a way of centralizing control of who the representatives are. So they're really not representing us. So structurally, this is correct. But in practice and the dynamic, the functioning structure has those other elements which are not actually part of the Constitution. So our job in enforcing is to address those problems and come up with solutions, whether they are structural solutions or functional, whatever it is. We have got to figure out a way to reestablish. And one of the keys to that is to bring Congress home. Once we get the small districts ratified, then it'll make it easier, much easier. And those guys will be back home in our hometowns and much more accessible, and they will represent us much more. So that is a major component of our strategy. And you can see, just looking at this diagram, it's kind of depressing when you really see how we've been hijacked and how we've allowed that. And so, but this is just, again, one view of the system. This is a floor plan. And so dynamics, that's the process. And that's where we're going to talk about, the parties and how things work and, what rules we need to change and how do we, there's so many things that we're going to get into. But right now we're doing step by step. So this is the structure. So very good point, Martin. Anybody else?
With all due respect, Michael, I love your, I'm an engine. Well, I was an engineer for many years. And so I love your handling of this. I guess I would go back though. My writing, I've written a lot of books, and rule of law is different, categorically different from functional or business or any other way of looking at things. So we have a common law, a proto-American, an Anglo-American 1,000-year-old system of how people deal with one another based on, well, not based on, but using two, the grand jury created in 970 AD and the militia created in 1014 AD. So they're ancient. They're way before the Articles of Confederation, based upon common law. So what in my writing, different from yours, I love yours. I'm just saying I handle it differently from you because I look at it as the common law brought us here, and so we have rule of law. And so when I ask people what is the Constitution, the only thing I want them to come up with, I want them to end up saying, well, it's the highest law that we have. Okay, good. So now categorically, we're not dealing with, functional requirements and all. We're dealing with law. And people understand that because when you violate the law, somebody's going to get you. Okay, so that's exactly what you just came back to right now when you were talking about bring Congress home and all that. So we have these two ancient institutions of the common law, grand jury and militia. They've been sitting on the shelf for forever. We almost haven't used it. We used them for 75 years after ratification of the Constitution. And after that, boom, gone. The war came and everything went with it. So under common law, we still live over, we still superintend, all of us together, over the common law, over our rule of law. And Article 6, Clause 2, we say it is the supreme law of this land, this Constitution. And I know you're going to get to all this, but I'm just structurally, I don't look at it so much as a process, because when I ask people, what is the Constitution? In your mind, what is it? And then, well, it's the greatest document, and it's the old, it's a revered. No. It's the highest law that we have. So when you tell that to anyone who's serving us in any capacity, from dog catcher to Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, they serve us. They must serve us, but not individually. So like you say, it's all of us together, and only together are we the supreme, not capital S, but we are the sovereign, small s sovereign. God, as you've always said, Michael, God is the capital S sovereign. Okay, where I will differ with you is when you call the House of Representatives a national body. Because George Washington, the only thing, and I know you know this, you've taught it, but the only thing he stood up in those 4 months in Philadelphia, the only thing he stood up to talk in plenary session to the whole group was on the last day, September 17th, I think it was, or I'm sorry, September 25th, the last day when Nathaniel Gorham, as Garfield Green teaches, when Nathaniel Gorham got him to stand up and make Article 1, Section 2, Clause 4, instead of saying 40,000 people in a House district, only 30,000, because 40,000 was too big. That was too many. That was too nationally feeling. You wanted it local. So that's one of the, as you will teach in the future here, that's the first action, if you want to call it national or coast to coast or whatever, countrywide action that tactical civics will do. We're going to go back and we're going to say, hey, let's get the states to finish ratifying that first what was called Article the First, small districts. So what that does now, looking at this picture up on the screen, that House of Representatives, all of those dots, those are districts. So instead of the House being a national thing, I'm talking categorically here, it is actually quite atomized. It's quite granular. It breaks down, and it's supposed to break down to very small, we hope, as many as 6,400 districts. That way, what we're doing in this time of great technological progress, we're giving the American people the tactical force massing power that we never had. So we now can have 6,400 offices now representing us. So instead of an electoral system, instead of always thinking representation, fine. They supposedly they represent me, but once they get there, they stop representing me. I don't care about electoral politics. I care about rule of law. So that's why I teach purely from a rule of law standpoint, because it adheres adheres to or adheres with the common law, the ancient rule of law. So it's pre-American. It's way, it's pre-constitutional. It's proto-American. So that's the only place I would. Our models would be different, but we end up at the same place. I know because I've seen your stuff and I've heard your stuff, and we're in agreement on all major areas.
Absolutely. Yeah, well said. But let me just say something about the national, because when I said national, I was imagining a scenario where the House of Representatives was all we had. It was its own government, and we, the people, were electing them. If we had a system like that, it would be considered a nation. But the House of Representatives is not a governing power by itself. It's part of the Congress, and the rest of the Congress is not structured that way. So it is definitely not a nation because of that. The House of Representatives
after the 17th, it is structured that way. It shouldn't have been, but
but it's not. It's still not entirely structured that way, but it's closer to a national system. And that's what this structural diagram shows. When you remove the states, then it's like, wow, there's still some difference in the House and the Senate, but basically, if this entity, the Congress, is representing we the people directly, then that is what the founders considered a national system. And the elites that are trying to destroy our country, they want that. They want a national system. They want to centralize everything, and they want us people to be small little peons that have no power because they centralized everything, and we just basically ratify whatever they do. So they're trying to morph us into a centralized system, and this structure diagram shows the original intent was definitely not that, and that as we look at the evolution in particular, not only because of the 1913, the Senate being elected popular, but all of the functionally, with the parties and the big corporations and the way things actually work, we're not being represented, and it is, we the people are more like subjects, but we're not. And so this is the original structure that we must understand it, and we must actually reform even this, because these districts are too big to have true representation. And so I really couldn't show that very well in the diagram, but yeah, we're exactly on the same page. And for those who don't know, that first right to ratify, there were 12 amendments in the original the Bill of Rights. 2 of them didn't pass. One of them has since been ratified. Well, they passed, but they didn't get ratified. And there's one that hasn't been ratified. It has passed, it's been approved, but it hasn't been ratified. And so we need to get a certain number of states. And that's the one that makes small districts for congressional seats. And that would give us thousands of congressmen, not 435. And then the Bring Congress Home would relocate them to their hometown, to their home district, where they are much more accessible and under the accountability of the people themselves, and they will actually represent them, take them out of the lobbyist theater of Washington, D.C. So, but that's the struggle. And this structural picture shows all of those things. But yeah, everything David said was right on. We are not a nation in that sense, but they are trying to make us into one. So part of our job is to not only enforce what we've got now, but to reform it to better even achieve the 6 objectives that we stipulate, that our servants have to achieve, and they're not doing a very good job right now, which means we're not doing a very good job.
Yeah, when we bring our senators back to our states, what we're doing is effectively negating the 17th Amendment, which is not an amendment because it's against the Constitution. So we are negating that amendment.
Yes, David, that's a good point. If you just consider the objectives, to form a more perfect union, to secure the blessings of liberty, that 17th Amendment did not help with that. No. And so you could argue on that, and we stipulate those objectives. So it's not like, wow, that's what the founders wanted, but the rest of us can ignore it. No, because they are failing to follow what we stipulated, you could make the argument that this is unconstitutional, and repealing it is basically nulling and voiding it. Absolutely. Yep. I agree with you, David. And this is the kind of thinking we need as the enforcers. We need to really understand it and use the power that we have to enforce the supreme law of the land.
We did it with prohibition. We can do it with the 17th.
Yes, that's right. We realized that was a mistake, and we undid it. Absolutely.
Thank you.
To Martin and Michael's conversation about the structure, and then when they were talking about now the political action committees and all of the political affiliation in there to get them elected, I was just curious, since this is the structure of the Constitution and what our founding fathers have set out. If there's any way that we could take this and maybe fine tune a little bit to see what it was set up to be back then and how these representatives were elected, and take it through the process, and then do a diagram to compare now, visualizing all of these political action committees and all of this stuff that's in there, and how now, like, you basically have to be filthy rich or a part of, like, we have no voice in it anymore, like they were saying. And I just want to see that visually. I don't know if that's something that we could do to kind of like show people that, we're just introducing this to, and showing them the structure of the U.S. Constitution, and showing them how the structure was intended to be. And something like this all normal. But what would be really great is to then have a diagram like this that shows this is how it used to be, and this is how it was designed to be. And now visually, this is where all of these things have came in unconstitutionally, and this is how it works now, and this is why we have no voice. And to be able, because a lot of people, like, that really hits home with them visually to see that.
Yeah.
And I was curious if that would be something like maybe we could even get AI to help us.
Yes. Well, we're going to do that. What is your name? I didn't catch your name.
Stacy.
Stacy. Oh, Stacy. Yeah. Okay. I know Stacy. But I just want to comment to it. So what you're saying is really important. And this is a more detailed, you're really diving into the more detail, which I could barely get what I got it. So I really can't address that in this diagram. But if I understand your point, all those things, the PACs, the parties, and all those entities, those exist because of federal and state laws. And if they're doing things that are incompatible with the purposes and the functions stipulated in our Constitution, right, then they're not valid. And so, and part of our enforcement is to go look at those laws and say, okay, where are they flawed? Where are they incompatible? And we need to repeal those laws. So, for example, if it, a political party has advantages that interfere with we the people doing our job, and that it promotes, people with money or corporations or whatever it does, that's part of the enforcement. And that's more detail than we can do today, but we are going to address those. We're going to have lots of classes where we dive into the details of specific areas, and we will cover that. So thank you for bringing that up. A very good point.
Yeah.
Inspire people.
Stacy, this is why we wrote so many books before we ever got to a complete system. It took a lot of years to do this, but if you wanted a graphic, if you wanted to see it, just take all the logos of the top of the, say, Fortune 100 or even the Fortune 50, and just put those logos up, and that's it. That's the power, because if you understand, federal laws are not written by legislators anymore. They don't even read most of them. They're written by law firms working for all those corporations. That's who writes laws. So when we bring them home, that's all going to stop. And Michael's going to talk about this. This class is going to start working through, okay, so what is tactical civic? How are we fixing it? Don't worry. He's getting there.
Yeah. There's a lot of material. We're going to take some time. And if you think back to the dynamic diagram where you had the political power and then the economic power with the rectangles, all of those dynamics with the corporations and all those networks, that's going to come into play, and that makes that rectangle bigger. And that's moving away from the objectives of that we stipulated. And so it's all illegal. And we're going to learn about that really in a deep level, but it's going to take some time because it's a lot of detail. So we're going to have to do this in a very thoughtful way. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it, guys. So keep coming back.
On behalf of the members of the AIG, we thank you for joining us tonight. We look forward to the discussion next week with Martin Holz. Your presence is what makes this whole thing worth it. The conversations and everything that you bring to the table, the wisdom that's brought to the table. And we're very thankful and grateful for everything that's being said here tonight. Thank you, Michael, for the time that you put in for this presentation. And we look forward to more. And Tactical Civics is a growing and education mission. And that's the importance. If we don't learn this, folks, we don't take the Republic back. It's pretty simple. If we don't glorify Jesus Christ, I don't believe we get the Republic back. We've been lazy. We've been complacent. It's time we get in touch with the High King. It's time that we learn our civic duties and responsibilities. It's time for you to get active in Tactical Civics in the AIG. Thanks for joining.
Have a wonderful evening. God bless. And we'll send you out with some music.
They taught us to vote and just hope for the best, but the swamp keeps on growing. We're failing the test. Red tie or blue tie, same strings on the stage. We the people grew weary of turning the page. No king on a throne, Romans 13 was twisted. In this republic, power was always enlisted. Grand jury and militia, still written in plain. Time to stand tall, no more begging again. We feel the fire in the comments, the anger online. But anger without duty is wasting our time. This is our republic, not their private domain. We enforce the Constitution, we're breaking the chains. County by county, the future begins. Tactical civics, now we step in. We the people, the solution is you. Lock arms, family, we're seeing it through. They said wait for the next one, just trust the process. While they print in this money and leave us the mess. We opened the books, read the founders' own words. Article 1, Section 8, now the truth will be heard. Bring Congress back home where the people can see. Real oversight, real accountability. This isn't left, this isn't right. This is we the people stepping into the light. This is our republic, we're drawing the line. Tactical civics, now come, now the future is mine. Every generation, lock arms and arise. The Constitution is duty placed in our lives. We the people, the solution is you. Lock arms, family, we're seeing it through. We the people, the solution is you. Tactical civic, the restoration starts local.